Hi, it's Hillary. Welcome to another Books and Builds video where I talk about books and build something inspired by these books in The Sims 4. Today's video is honestly more of a booze and builds because I'm talking about two haunted house books that were released in 2023. The cover of the first book actually inspired this build, and that book is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. I've never read a Grady Hendrix book, so I wasn't sure what to expect aside from what I've heard from other readers. I've wanted to read Horror Store for a while, and the Southern Book Club's Guide to Vampire. I don't know the exact title, but I know that there are a couple other Grady Hendrix books I want to read. I just haven't done it. As a person who appreciates well-crafted dark humor, I was pleasantly surprised and unsettled at times when I read this book. Louise Joyner and her brother Mark have a contentious relationship. Louise thinks that Mark is lazy, and Mark thinks Louise is uptight. Things take a dramatic turn when their parents die in a car accident, and they're forced to work together to tie up loose ends and eliminate the years of clutter, including creepy dolls, unsettling puppets, and taxidermied squirrels, and some of their dad's economic stuff, but he was a professor, and that's a lot more boring than scary puppets. And although Louise doesn't trust Mark to settle the estate, she knows she can't get the house ready for sale without his help. And some houses are a little more tricky to sell than others. How to Sell a Haunted House is campy and just the haunted house book I needed to read when I picked it up. I've got to point out some major content warnings. Creepy dolls, puppets. If either of those unsettle you too much, you will not like this book. If Annabelle and Chucky are not for you, this book is also not for you. And then there's mild to moderate gore in this book. Like, there are some scenes where the characters get injured, but the moderate one is, like, important to note just because it was kind of gross. And that particular scene could be triggering for some people. And as with any book, I highly suggest checking out the content warnings yourself because everybody's different. Everybody has different triggers. I'm sure there are things that would upset certain readers that I would never think to point out. So just getting that out of the way. Another important element of this book is family dynamics. Louise is a single mother who carries around a ton of baggage from her childhood. Before her parents actually die, you get a sense that there's a strain to the relationship, even though she does love them. She moved away from Charleston as soon as she could, and it's clear that her brother resents her for leaving, and also some other unresolved issues from their youth. And as Louise and Mark work together to empty out their parents' house, they realize there's something suspicious going on. Like, something's not right, and they think that the other one is messing with them, so they don't speak up about it at first. But their cousin's a realtor, and she refuses to sell the house because she can sense that something is off too. All Louise wants to do is sell the house and go home to her daughter, but her part of the inheritance is at stake, and the house doesn't seem to want to let her go specifically. The relationship dynamic between Mark and Louise was so interesting to me because we get a sense of their completely different perceptions of their childhood. And as readers, who should we believe? In order to fight everything working against them, they have to work together and address their past head on. But can they do that? Overall, How to Sell a Haunted House is compelling and gripping, and it offers a unique take on the haunted house genre. It takes classic tropes and completely ups the ante. With the book's exploration of family dynamics and complicated relationships and also supernatural elements, it will keep fans of horror engaged from beginning to end. There are also some pretty chaotic side characters, so I enjoyed this book, even though, it mildly traumatized me. If anybody happened to pass me while I was on a walk listening to this audiobook, they probably saw a look of horror on my face at certain points. So there's that. I guess now is a good time to talk about the build. The house's exterior is inspired by the cover of How to Sell a Haunted House, and I pulled the interior floor plan from a random website because floor plans are a bit of a struggle for me at this point. I just haven't built enough in The Sims 4. I knew I wanted to incorporate some of the statues in the game to function as the puppets and dolls from the book, so you'll see those somewhat soon. I also wasn't sure what interior design aesthetic I wanted, so I went back and forth on so many things during this process. I wanted it to look like it was a nice house that fell into slight disrepair, because that's kind of how it was described in the book. I did not clutter the house because I don't have time for that. This was actually the first time that I recorded a Books and Builds video and had to take a break because I had spent so long working on it. So this was almost 3 hours of footage condensed into this video. I'm also a little impressed with myself because I feel like I branched out and used different items that I typically choose for my gameplay. A lot of the builds I make for my Sims end up as pastels with a more cutesy vibe, so building something that feels more realistic and less Pinteresty was nice. I guess this is my long-winded way of saying that I wanted the house to feel like maybe at one point it was cozy. The other book I want to discuss is The September House by Carissa Orlando. The September House follows Margaret, a middle-aged woman who's determined to stay in her dream home even after it becomes apparent that the house is haunted. After decades of renting and barely scraping by, she and her husband Hal find the perfect Victorian house for sale at a reasonable price, so it would be silly to walk away from that deal. As they begin to settle into their home, they realize that it's haunted. Every September, the walls begin to drip blood, and at first they think maybe it's a leak. It's not. By the end of the month, there are just rivers of blood pouring down the steps. And then the nights are filled with shrieking, awful sounds, so they don't get much sleep. And the ghosts of former residents begin to appear. Some are frightening and others are less so. Some are even helpful. But after the first September, most people would have left, but not Margaret. Margaret is stubborn and determined to stay in her house. After 4 years, Hal's done. He leaves abruptly and nobody can seem to find him. It's probably because of his unfortunate encounter with Master Vale in the basement last September, but the basement's boarded up. Just don't go in there. Hal and Margaret's daughter Catherine begins to grow concerned because she can't get a hold of her dad and her mom just kind of keeps brushing her off. So she decides to visit and search for her missing father. And the problem is that she has no idea about the hauntings, and she arrives just as the usual September shenanigans begin to kick up. As Catherine tries to discover what happened to her father, Margaret is so determined to protect the house's secrets, and it might be at the expense of her safety and security. Like, Catherine begins to worry about her mother's sanity and safety. It's a whole deal. And I would say that the September House also has so much dark humor integrated into the story, but it's different from How to Sell a Haunted House. I feel like it's a little more subtle and it's just different. And the book's biggest content warnings are for domestic abuse and alcoholism, so be on the lookout for that. I enjoyed The September House. As I read the book, I tried to predict what would happen, and with horror and thrillers, I generally separate what I think will happen and what I want to happen, and usually there's no overlap. So in this case, the book took a wildly different direction than I predicted around the 80% mark, which is good, because by the 70% point, I started to worry a little about the direction the book went, and I was pleasantly surprised. And this book is an excellent choice for readers who want a good Gothic-style horror with salacious family secrets afoot. I don't have much else to say about the books or the build at this point, so enjoy some background music and don't get too worried about the dolls and statues. They can't hurt you. Bye.